dose.
Warning, listening to Unleash Your Genius can be good for your health.
Symptoms may include looking and feeling better,
More energy, healthier kids, and increased productivity.
Unleash Your Genius podcast brings you the science, art, and philosophy of health, wellness,
Epigenetics, and lifestyle.
Hello and welcome to the Unleash Your Genius podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Peterson. Today I have two really special guests for you today. Larry and Kay Lynne were both obese and in ill health when a family health tragedy prompted them to question everything health related. They both had their health restored and their lives transformed for the better by adopting a real food, low carb, healthy fat way of eating. At the time, their recently adopted daughter was only 2. And Larry, who had a science degree background as an environmental scientist, decided to apply himself to health and nutrition with a completely open mind and an evolutionary perspective. The only thing that made sense to Larry is that conventional nutritional advice most likely had to be wrong, especially over the last 50 years as chronic preventable conditions have become, commonplace. Larry quickly found the science and logic of LCHF, low carb, healthy fats, and the metabolic theory of obesity, as he loved many of the mainstay foods of the LCHF diet, and he understood the science behind low carb, healthy fat. He adopted this way of eating to great success. 7 months later, Kay Lynne joined him. Larry ended up losing 125 pounds, and Kay Lynne lost 70 pounds. They also each resolved numerous lifelong health issues. Their daughter has also thrived on real food, going from 3rd percentile in height to 25th percentile. The Diamond's life passion has become helping others restore their health with the low-carb, healthy fat diet, with a particular interest in helping working families transition to real food and to prevent family health tragedies and to help families thrive. Larry is also particularly interested in environmental aspects of food production. And while Kay Lynne, her central focus is really on child development and children thriving in their development and educational attainment. Larry and Kay Lynne have lived the transformation that happens when you use ancestral-inspired eating and living. They believe healing and thriving happens through wisdom of the body that ancestrally aligned eating unlocks our innate healing ability. Their goal is to help others have the best scientific information on nutrition that is a strong basis in evolution, anthropology, and cultural culinary traditions. This is the transformation they used to change the course of their lives and the life of their daughter. And I am excited to share their story with you guys. Hi, Larry and Kay Lynne. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah. Thanks, Larry. And Kay Lynne, I'm excited. I know I've already introduced you guys, but can you tell us a little bit more about who you guys are?
We began our health journey about 4.5 years ago. It started with my husband, actually. He actually started on his part of his health journey first. I didn't really buy in until about 8 months in. We were both morbidly obese. We had recently had his uncle, who was his father figure growing up, move in with us, who had retired, and we found out very quickly that his uncle was suffering from early onset Alzheimer's. And then in addition to that, about a year before, we had adopted our daughter. So we had had all these very big life changes, and Larry started kind of worrying about the fact that seeing his uncle in the situation he was in, he saw himself going down the same path health-wise. And not only were we obese, we were having problems. We were both pre-diabetic. We were both on CPAP machines. My husband was having, lots of intestinal issues. I had achy joints, low energy most of the time. So my husband decided to kind of take his health into his own hands, and through his love of science and his ability to kind of question the reigning of advice at the time. He was kind of thinking basically, if everyone is, following, or if everyone's trying to follow this advice, why as a country are we getting more sick? And, he had gone through various diets, as I did too, both separately and together. We had both tried low calorie, eat less, move more. Both were vegetarians at different parts in our life, and nothing ever stuck, for lack of a better word. And so what he decided to do was just throw out everything he had been taught about nutrition, and he started with a simple question: why am I hungry after I eat a big, huge meal? and that kind of started him down this path of, insulin resistance, what grains can do to our insulin, and little by little, he was sharing his knowledge that he found with me. And at first I was very resistant. I basically thought it was just another fad, and that, after about 6 months, we'd go back to doing what we always did, just like we had always did. We had like every piece of exercise equipment in the world, in our extra room. And our daughter loved to play on it like a jungle gym. We never used it. But little by little, about 8 months in, I realized that he not only was dropping weight, like, fairly significantly, but he was happier. He had more energy. He just all around, and he wasn't complaining at all. Like, he was very happy with how he was eating. And so at that point, I decided to kind of take the plunge, and I started, and very quickly found similar results. So 4 years down the line, he's lost about 130 pounds. I lost about 70. The bulk of both of our weight losses were in the first year. And so we've been able to maintain that and continue to get stronger every day. So that's kind of our overview.
That's amazing. And so, Larry, when you first started, what was like one of the first non-conventional pieces of information that you came across?
As Kay Lynne said, I got really curious on why certain foods seemed to make me hungrier. My grandmother on my uncle's and mom's side had passed from diabetes complications and even had her leg amputated when I was very young. So that was something that never quite left me, that experience. And my uncle, we had tried when he retired to get him to move in with us, and he refused, and he was not around immediate family after he retired. And so we did not know the progression of what was happening to him. But I did have the thought, my grandmother had diabetes, my uncle got Alzheimer's. What if diabetes and Alzheimer's are related? And I had always heard carbs raise blood sugar, and raised blood sugar is one of the hallmarks of diabetes. So even though the conventional medical establishment doesn't seem to do anything with those two pieces of information, it really captured my imagination. So I finally made the commitment to go get rid of refined carbs. And the day I started in May 2013, I haven't bought any bread or pasta at a supermarket since then. I didn't use any books at that time. I did use a number of websites, And I quickly came upon a gentleman named Sam Feltham, who's now the pretty remarkable leader of the Public Health Collaboration in the UK, which is he's a director, and most of the people involved are general practitioners in the United Kingdom that are real food practitioners. But at the time, he had done a lot of self-experiments with like a 5,000 calorie, 30-day high-fat experiment or 21 days. And he only gained a couple pounds, but he actually lost inches off his waist.
Right.
And then he did the same number of calories, but high carb and blood work. He was a healthy young guy, and for the sake of science, his triglycerides over HDL went from under 1 to over 4, and he gained over 10 pounds, maybe closer to 20, and gained a few inches on his waist. So his website was great. Professor Noakes in South Africa, which probably a lot of your listeners know about, he was at that time, there were resources on YouTube and articles. So Peter Attia, his name comes up in a lot of search engines, and he had a great explanation. I found the Ansel Keys story and found out why there was very flimsy evidence, if any evidence at all, that high fat in a diet is associated with any bad health outcome, and especially bad cardiovascular. So, and I have a stats background from being an environmental scientist, and it was very easy for me to understand, because of all my statistical work, that causation is, or correlation in no way is connected with causation. So the critiques of the low-fat hypothesis and the cholesterol and the diet heart hypothesis were very easy for me to understand. So it was a collection of many different sources.
Right. And so in the early stages, what was it like for you in the household when you would have changed your diet first, and then Kay Lynne you were pretty much doing, I'm not sure, the same thing. How did that transition happen in the beginning?
She is, and has been throughout our partnership, so supportive of me. When I changed what we bought at the supermarket, and then I took over most of the cooking, she was having the help at about that time. We were not only helping my uncle, he was actually living with us at that time. And then as his condition progressed, we weren't able to start with that. But she was having to spend a lot of time also helping another relative. So I kind of took over the cooking chores, and she did not complain about no longer getting bread and pasta at home. I will say that because we didn't use a book, we definitely did not do a Whole30 approach personally. I love it if it works for people, but if I can share that there's more than one way to restore your health, and we just naturally kind of fell into a way that for me at that time worked for me, and then she found her own particular rhythm when she decided to make the change. But she liked the food. She did like the food here, but she was not quite willing to make the changes at her workplace or socially.
Right. That's what I was just going to add. So because he had taken over the cooking, we had kind of shared the cooking before, I was totally happy for him to take that over completely, because being an elementary school teacher and then also having the added work with our relatives, it just worked really well. And like he said, the food was really good. I was very happy at home. But then as far as meals out from work or going out socially with friends, I still continued to eat the way I had done before. So it wasn't really, we didn't have any arguments or anything about it. I just chose not to do it outside the home.
Okay. So you didn't have any, right. You just kind of went along with what you were reading at the time and So you got rid of pasta and bread first, Larry? Is that right?
Yeah, and also fast food. And I was probably in any given week 2 to 4 times a week at fast food. And I did, which was big for me, I was able to give up potato chips and candy bars. I was just committed. I was pretty scared straight by my uncle's Alzheimer's, so I was very highly motivated. And I've come to call it go time. And what is so interesting about go time, and one of my passions of trying to do this vocationally and in the meantime helping people on social media, is I think everyone doing like whatever their choice of getting healthy is, calorie restriction, move more, marathons, going to the gym, every approach like that, even though they're very unsuccessful for most for very strong biological reasons, most of them invoke starvation mode, so they're not sustainable. When people attempt something like that, it's what I call go time. So there's some combination of hopefully intrinsic factors, sometimes external, which are also fine, whatever the combination of motivators are. But so my go time was really at an all-time high, unfortunately, because of what had happened to my uncle. And just being, it's a cliche, but sick and tired of being sick and tired. That combined with the thought that there had to be something wrong with the conventional advice, I kind of committed to getting rid of the sugar and carby food. And then I quickly found that via the internet that fat wasn't the problem. So I think why I succeeded was that I started to replace the foods I had given up with foods that I had always loved, but maybe didn't think they were as healthy as I now know them to be. So thankfully, low carb, healthy fat foods, I've always resonated with. So that made it really easy for me to transition.
So, right. Now, so your go time is like what most people say is their why, right? Like you've got to have a why you're going to do this to succeed. So your why was your family's, your uncle's Alzheimer's condition. Is that right?
There was that, and also my own health condition. I started shortly before turning 48, and I've mentioned this a lot in my articles, but my intuition was telling me that I wasn't going to even hit 50. So it was beyond not wanting to get Alzheimer's. I was, as my wife went through some of my health conditions, so I had the sleep apnea, I had back pain. You're a chiropractor. That went away when I gave up corn. It turns out that corn is the most pro-inflammatory grain for both me and my wife. So it wasn't just weight loss. It was actually weight loss helped that back pain go away using a standing desk at work did, but also giving up pro-inflammatory foods was instrumental. So I was living day to day in a lot of pain. I had brain fog. So it was the low quality of my life and our daughter. So we were both infertile. Either one or both of us was infertile. And we've owned up to it that was a consequence of our lifestyle decisions. But one of the great things that happened was that we were able to adopt our daughter. So we went out of our way. Over 33 families wanted to adopt her. So we had become her parents. That's a huge responsibility, and we loved her. And that was such a motivating factor to not, frankly, want to leave her without a dad, probably in just a couple years. So all these things were going through me. It was, I think go time cannot be overstated. I think it's more important than good information. But my passion with the good information is, because I can see this at my workplace, so many people are not served with good information. So I want everyone to have the best chance at success when whatever combination of factors they get to that why place or that go time.
Okay, guys, for our listeners, what would be your 3 biggest tips to help somebody who is thinking about making this type of a lifestyle change?
Well, I would say that like Larry stated earlier, there's not one way to do it. You have to find a way that works for you. We started slowly taking out one thing at a time. We started with wheat and gluten products. Then we moved to corn. And as we did that, we started replacing those items with the high fat, high healthy fat foods. And so that was our journey. Other people need to, do a Whole30 approach. If you feel like you need to get it all out and do it all at once, and that works for you, definitely take that approach. But just be open to the approach that's going to work for you and your family. And I would also say that if not everyone in your family is on board, don't use that as an excuse. Because, if Larry had used it as an excuse that I wasn't on board, who knows where we would be now. I'm so thankful to him every day that he went ahead and didn't care what I was going to do. He knew he had to do it for himself. And, through his love of us in science and him continually, sharing that science with me. So, sharing your passion with those around you. So I guess those are two big parts.
Mine will be in a little different vein, but I think both of those are great insights to how to have a successful journey. And especially the second one, I thought about this a lot. Part of my go time was saying that if Kay Lynne was ready to start now or not, and since go time is so unique and individual, I would say more often than not, go time is not going to be exactly the same month and day as a significant other. So I made the conscious decision to say no one in the world, even the most important person in the world, my wife, ever gets a say about what I eat. And the reason that that's so empowering, if your partner doesn't get a say in what you eat, then certainly another family member will not get a say. A coworker will not get a say. Even a lifelong friend will not get a say. Now, that doesn't mean that we force our way of eating on anyone else. If we're going to a social situation that might not have any choices that we can make, which is rare. But if there is, we'll just fast through that event or try and bring our own food. Or if there's a social event and there's some okay choices, not an everyday choice, then we will mindfully do that as well.
Right. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good.
Right. But one other, I'm an environmental scientist, but I've always been fascinated by evolution and the relationship of people to nature. And I had this perspective that healing happens through body wisdom, and that everyone alive today is this incredible gift honed by not only all of human evolution, but we also have some of the healing abilities of going back to the first life forms on Earth. So I love the title of your podcast about unleashing your genetic potential, or what's been called epigenetics. And that is so empowering to me and so cool that most chronic illnesses, most of what people suffer from today, are actually not genetically based or because my parents had it and their parents had it, but they're actually determined whether or not that condition actually is triggered or not. It's determined by lifestyle choices. And to me, that is one of the most empowering thoughts there is.
Right. Thanks, Larry. Yeah. I think a lot, we used to say, well, my father had heart disease, my grandfather had heart disease, so I'm going to get heart disease. But if you go back far enough through your family tree, I would say probably your great-great-great-great-grandfather didn't have heart disease, and that was not in your genetic line. It's not until they started eating and moving differently that those things started to become a habit in your family. And thanks for the epigenetic reference, because that is so important for people to understand. I think that, if you can, just like a plant, a natural plant in nature, if it's not getting the things that it requires for health, it's going to express, yellow leaves, or it's not going to grow properly. But if you put that same plant in an environment that it thrives in, you will see it change without any need for any external intervention, if that makes sense. But thanks for bringing up the epigenetics.
And it's the same plant with the same genetics.
Right.
So, analogy.
Right. So I wanted to, for me, as I'm also a health coach as well. I think that a lot of our struggles are with habits, and I've gone through a lifestyle change similar to you guys, and we all have our habits that can be difficult to change. And with this podcast, I wanted to help people hear other stories about successes and struggles that you guys have gone through. Can you go through a little bit more of like what it was like for you guys to give something up that you just loved?
I can definitely talk to that because, I had said that it wasn't really a problem with how, Larry was cooking. And it wasn't when we were just giving up wheat. Although I do remember almost the day, the time. I remember where I was standing in the kitchen when he came home and told me that we were going to have to give up corn. Like that pretty much almost floored me at that point, because I'm from the southwestern United States. So corn was a very big part of our upbringing. If it wasn't Mexican food, with corn tortillas or, masa to make tamales, it was Southern food, corn bread, corn casserole. And so that was really tough for me to kind of process. And it took me a couple of days of truly being angry. And poor Larry, like the anger was, directed at him because he was the one who happened to come across the information.
Yeah, right. and he did. And it was a pretty easy experience, or experiment rather. We kind of went off it and on it, so that I wanted her to see what just that one change, if it would result in less inflammation and less joint pain, which she suffered from, and the back pain. So while I said there was a scientific basis of corn being inflammatory for a lot of people, I wanted her to test it out. And the testing was really what convinced her.
Right. Yeah, so I very reluctantly took it out of my diet, and I phased it out. I didn't take it out all at once. Just like we said before, we stopped buying those products at home. So I stopped eating them less and less at home, and then I extended that to social and work food. And so then went probably a good 6 to 8 weeks without corn, and not really thinking about it like, okay, now I'm going to reintroduce it and I'm going to see what the results are. It was more of, I was out with friends, there were tortilla chips available, and I decided to kind of, break that fast on corn and have it. And so I did, and I indulged. And by the next day, my hip, I had really bad pain in my hips before our change. That had come back. Knee pain came back. And I felt sluggish and bloated. So, like Larry alluded to, it was very much self-correcting. Once I took it out and then reintroduced it, the way I felt was very much the best reason for me to take it back out of my diet and not reintroduce it.
And one thing to add about making new habits is I do think that the first 3 weeks, there's a reason that so many popular books talk about a 21-day challenge or reset, or the Whole30 says 30 days. You need a lot more mindfulness and intention when making a change. But then I found that my taste changed so profoundly. And people don't often believe this could happen, but I used to be very fond of Reese's peanut butter cups. And I also, the highest cocoa chocolate that I could stomach starting out was 65 or 75%. And then after a number of months, I tried 85%, and that was fantastic. I got used to that. And then 75% felt too sweet after a little bit. But I tried a Reese's peanut butter cup, and and I could eat like one of those whole Halloween bags of the mini ones.
Right.
And then after about 8 months, I tried it again. That was about Christmas time, my first year. And I was at a Christmas party, and they had them in a bowl. And it just tasted like chalk. It didn't taste like the 85% real food chocolate did, which actually tastes like a real food. It tasted bizarre to me. So this thing that I had probably tasted bizarre when I first tasted it, but because I was introduced to it as a kid and they hook you in with the sugar and stuff, it had become pleasurable. That taste left. So, and then I at least reawakened a taste for real food. Salting food helps a lot. And with low carb, you tend to lose salt. So it's very important to salt food, and especially the first few days to get over keto flu. A lot of people are now taking magnesium and salt, and they're better informed by all the great books out there on how to do the transition. We didn't know, so we had a few days of keto flu. But butter and salt are so tasty. Like one of my favorite foods now is Brussels sprouts with salt and butter. And and we have a restaurant. There's a paleo restaurant in Austin, and they do the best Brussels sprouts, and they add bacon bits. And we're like, oh, Brussels sprouts. I mean, that's like replace corn chips. It's now like Brussels sprouts. We got to have the Brussels sprouts. So,
did you ever think you were going to say that 5 years ago?
No.
And it's funny because so our daughter, who's now 7, it's hilarious to see us at the restaurant because everyone's fighting over the last Brussels sprout on the table.
That's great.
And her and my husband actually, when we have dinner at home, they fight over the fattiest piece of meat. You know, you will find her stealing meat off his plate. You know, the fatty meat.
Right.
Yeah, and so it, like you said, your palate does change, but you do have to give it that chance to change. So
yes.
so really, you know, when you find what you're going to start with, if you're going to start with just taking out one thing at a time, do that. Or if you're going to start with whole 30, being mindful and sticking to that for a good 21 to 30 days.
It gets easier.
Yes.
And it's hard. It gets easier. So that would be a big piece of advice that I would give people. It definitely gets easier, especially when you start affecting yourself on a metabolic level. So normalizing your hunger hormones and becoming more of a fat burner. I will say that after 2 months, actually after a few weeks, my appetite plummeted so much. And I cannot emphasize how different low-carb healthy fat is for success. I think it takes a success from the 1% range to like the upwards of 50% success range, because once you become something called fat adapted and have stable blood sugars, and you can almost literally feel, it was so cool. I remember feeling like, wow, I was hungry for a moment and now I'm not. And when I was a carb burner, that never happened. If people are carb burners right now, they're like, wow, you can actually go from a little bit of hunger and then that hunger goes away. That never happens to me. I just get more and more hungry. And of course, the health benefits are great, but having to not revolve your life around when's my next snack or meal, that's a huge win, huge life upgrade just in itself.
For sure. Let's see. Where do I want to go with this? From when you guys were changing your eating habits, you would have family around. How would you strategize that a little bit more specifically as far as like going to their house for dinner? I have a couple of clients that struggle with that because most of their family are not ready to change. And so could you speak to that a little bit about how to change your diet even though the rest of your family's not ready to?
Well, that's something that we dealt with on a pretty regular basis because my mom and my stepfather do live close by and we go to visit them often. And what they were supportive of our choice to do it, but they, were nowhere near trying, wanting to do it themselves. So what we would do and what we still do is I basically pack up an ice chest and a couple of bags whenever we go to visit, and we take our own food. And while that might sound like more work to begin with, it helps us when we're there because we're able to not only still have the food we love, but then I cook for them, and I tell them, hey, you guys take the weekend off. I'm going to be the cook. And so they're, and they can still eat or snack on whatever, their food is. But if I offer to make the main meals and I offer to buy and bring the food, then that seems to be a great way to kind of bridge that. And then you're also able to kind of introduce some of those foods that they might not be eating on a regular basis.
And Kay Lynne's food is so delicious that there are absolutely no complaints. I mean,
nice.
I don't know if you found this with relatives, but a lot of times, and Kay Lynne's and me as well, we kind of have our go-to low-carb, healthy fat equivalent of a lot of comfort foods, and they love it. And she's gotten very adept at the Brazilian cheese bread, which is higher carb count, but we can have mindfully every once in a while. But it is grain-free. It's mostly tapioca, and even though they have wheat on a regular basis, to them it's one of the most delicious breads that they eat all year. So that worked out well. And we also try and be very appreciative, eat as much as we can of their food, but if there's something that we just can't, that we know will inflame us, then we say we really appreciate the effort you put in, but either we're allergic to this or we know from past experiences that we just don't do well on it, and they understand that explanation. And then online, I've never had to go here, but I've heard people at some point on family members that just don't get it, kind of have to look them in the eyes and say, I'm here to enjoy time with you. How I choose to eat is my choice, and my decisions that impact my health are me and my immediate family. And while I love spending time with you and I know food's important, the most important thing is us getting to share time and together. And whether or not I'm eating the same foods as you, that doesn't get in the way of us sharing time together. So I've never had to use that, but I think that might be a way to approach things.
That's nice. Yeah, I like that. So let's talk about, I know you guys are running out of time. I just want to get into the cooking transition because I know a lot of people come from all fast food, simplicity to having to learn how to cook again and use all these utensils and buy these things, that we're not used to buying, like vegetables. How was that transition to you? Was it difficult for you to learn how to start cooking? What was that like?
Yeah, so we have two different cooking backgrounds. I come from a multi-generational breakdown of cooking skills, and I'm from a single parent household, and my mom had lost all cooking skills. In fact, I was the only cook in our house growing up, and ironically, I cooked this slow-cooked meat dish. I think my ancestral instincts told me to cook meat very slowly, like a cheap cut of roast meat that ironically was probably the healthiest thing I could have done for myself. Right. And then the other thing I cooked was cheese omelets. So for whatever reason, I was getting these super nutrient-dense foods. And then, of course, that was in the context of a lot of fast food and the school lunches. But my biggest tip is keep it simple. Keep it simple. And if you use good quality ingredients, what I found is get one good pan. I happen to, about the same time I started, have bought a good quality cast iron pan. So for a while, I was making hamburgers and steaks, and then on the other part of the pan, frying up some asparagus or sauteing some spinach. So meat and veggies are such a big part of the diet. In fact, I joke that trillions of dollars are being spent on the diabetes and chronic illness crisis, and I can solve it in 3 words: meat and veg. Right. But you can make such a delicious burger, especially if you use a healthy fat. I found cooking things in butter or lard or beef tallow brings out so many of the inherent tasty qualities, and then salting well. So don't try and get too fancy at first. Find about 3 to 5 go-to meals that you can rotate, and use a slow cooker. So if you're busy, slow cookers are fantastic, because in about 10 or 15 minutes in your morning as you're getting ready for your work and school days, you can kind of get everything into the slow cooker, let the slow cooker do all the work, and come home to a delicious meal that often, if you've done like a 2 or 3 pound roast, can last for multiple meals. So that 15-minute of work hasn't just given you dinner for that night, but potentially leftovers the next day. And then with roast, we repurpose it different ways. So maybe the first night it's a pot roast, and then maybe the next night it becomes toppings for a salad, and then maybe the next night it kind of becomes, we have almond flour tortillas, so it kind of becomes a fajita tostada, but the base work was literally only 15 minutes for like 3 dinners and possibly lunches at work. So slow cookers are a big tip of mine.
Right. Yeah. Making leftovers really helps as well, doesn't it?
Yes, leftovers, and the term batch cooking. I know a lot of people talk about batch cooking, and if you have the time over your weekend to cook up a big amount of ground beef, or they might call it mince, I don't know, but if you cook up 2 or 3 pounds, season it well, and put it in the refrigerator, that too then can become multiple meals. One night you might have it with some vegetables. The next day you might add that to your eggs in the morning. And then, oh, right. And so just, cooking up a big, whatever you like, cook up a big amount of it, and then portion it out so that you can have that throughout the week. And then also easy things that are very nutrient dense. So we eat avocados like they're going out of style, and then boiled eggs. We always have boiled eggs on hand, and avocados, and good quality cheese, like cheese from grass-fed cows. So we're always making sure that we have high nutrient dense snacks that we can very easily get and eat, so that we're never having to put too much work in if we are hungry.
And I think in Australia you guys have Costco, and I sometimes get a wild salmon from wild Alaskan salmon that's smoked. And so it literally takes me 30 seconds to peel off a little bit, and it comes out to about $2. So salmon sounds expensive, but it's so nutrient dense and filling. So for my work lunch, I can just get some salmon, cut a little piece of cheese, I make 3-ingredient guacamole, so really just the avocado, some salt, and some lime. So just those 3 ingredients, so it's super fast. So I joke that I do no lunch ever over $5 and often significantly less than that, and never over 5 minutes of prep. So, and you can hard boil 12 or 18 or 24 eggs in as much time as it takes to hard boil 2, and then you're set for the week.
Right. Well, you guys, when is your cookbook coming out?
Well, we'd love to, but yeah, going back to the keep it simple. If you use good ingredients, I found I tell Kay Lynne all the time, and she's so inventive now. And actually, a lot of people find this low carb, healthy fat reignited her passion for cooking. So it's really, truly, not only have we gotten healthy, but our food enjoyment has gone up so dramatically. And it's just a joy when she comes up, and sometimes she uses recipes. Sometimes she'll just try something out, and she's made all these different types of pestos using she can tell you what ingredients. But yeah, we have to. The problem is we kind of do it off the top of her head. So every time I make chili, I'll tell you the truth, I don't measure the spices. So it comes out, I kind of know them, so I don't do it just randomly. But it comes out slightly different each time. And that's okay. If you're a measurer, go for it, and you'll be more consistent. Yeah. If you kind of get a feel for it, you can also cook that way.
Nice. What did you guys do for exercise, and what do you do now?
Okay, well, that's interesting. When I was growing up, because of the fake food, I didn't mention this, but I think in retrospect, I had lifelong asthma. So the kids in my school, when we had to, in the U.S., do the 6-minute fitness run or other activities, I tried to be as active as I could, but they would call me Cherry Diamond because I would get so red. So a little play on Larry, obviously, Cherry. Right. So I never became really much into cardiovascular simply because my body couldn't do it. So that kind of makes logical sense. But I always had a dream of, to me, doing a 5K. So I started in May at about 290, May 2013 at 290. Around the August, I was around 270, maybe 275. I did start doing a couch to 5K program, but I knew I was smart enough to say there was no way that I could do it in 8 weeks because my body, there was no way. I might have done serious damage. So every time they would say to go up, I would do the same thing for at least an entire week. But by the fall of, or by February of the next year, so I started in August, I did my first 5K, which to Cherry Diamond, who could never run 100 yards or certainly 200 yards, a 5K seemed like a Zach Bitter 100-mile ultra run. Mm-hmm. So I did do that. But then I kind of found Mark Sisson at the same time, understood that I could get much more bang for my buck doing more high-intensity body weight stuff. So I never used a gym, but I did go through the Mark Sisson Primal Health Coach program, and part of that is not only the nutrition, but really how to do a variety of body weight exercise as well. So ever since then, I kind of keep up a regular routine of pull-ups. We have a pull-up bar, kettlebell swings, push-ups, burpees. I sprint once a week. And now at my workplace, I've started to use exercise bands and do more isometrics during my workday, which you can easily do at your desk. So it's more I try and do a mile run here and there just to keep that part up, but I no longer do 5Ks. So mostly body weight exercises, playing with my daughter, using a standing desk at work, and the once a week sprinting.
Nice.
And just a small note, that's all pretty similar for me. I don't do as much of the sprinting as Larry, but when I did finally start this way of life, about 6 months into it, I found out I had to have major surgery. So at the beginning, I was walking probably 3 to 4 times a week on the treadmill, and running some as I lost a little bit more weight and it was more comfortable to run. I did jog a bit, but 6 months in, I had to have major surgery and was not able to exercise for about 3 months after my surgery. But I made, so not able to exercise, but I continued to eat the way that we were eating, and I actually lost 20 more pounds without exercise, just because of how I was choosing to eat. So while exercise is very important, it is we feel that, it's just a small part of our original success.
For weight loss, it's a small part, but for mental wellness and getting all the benefits of a healthy diet, it's awesome. But we that's a good point. We don't do exercise for weight maintenance, but mostly for the mental and life benefits that it gives us. And our daughter is so active, and we have 2 dogs. I think you heard one of them in the background. So there's so many ways. We don't personally use a gym. It's great if you choose to do that, but we didn't find that it was necessary. And I love just incorporating it. It's very efficient to just incorporate it, playing with my daughter at my desk, less than 10 minutes a day of body weight exercises most days. So less time than it takes most people to go to a gym, I'm done.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting that, you guys lost a large amount of weight, and, exercise was not a major factor in that weight loss for you guys, or, you guys 125 pounds or 57 kilograms, and Kay Lynne, you were like 70, you lost 70 pounds. And it wasn't, you weren't sweating and stressing at the gym every day. It was through how you ate and what you provided your body with.
Exactly. And sleep. Once I started eating better, I started sleeping better, and I think that definitely helped too. Like I made sure that I got in bed at a reasonable hour. I didn't, I had always been, because we had a young child at the time. Once she went to sleep, I would always stay up to try to get extra chores done around the house. That's one thing I stopped doing. Like when my body felt tired, I didn't push myself past that. I made sure I got 8 hours of sleep a night, and I think that also really helped.
And it kind of underscores to me how important the concept of becoming a fat burner, or I urge everyone to go to the internet and Google the term fat adaptation. So I mentioned that our hunger went down, and I was able to do an occasional multi-day fast, or certainly have 1 or 2 meals a day without any effort whatsoever, because once the low carb hormonal effects, and I think we got healthier and more mitochondria, because once you give your body fat as a fuel or become fat adapted, the mitochondria love that even without exercise, I think you increase your mitochondrial density, and then our body sensed how much extra body fat we had, so our appetites naturally went down. And even though we never measured calories, we might have been having 1,200 calorie days. If somebody does that, but they haven't lowered their insulin or become a fat burner, they invoke starvation mode. But for us, our body grabbed an extra 1,300 calories from our body fat, so our metabolism never suffered. And hey, 1,300 of our daily calories came from our body fat. So that's how we lost the fat even without exercise.
Interesting. I hadn't heard of the mitochondrial biogenesis without exercise before. That's interesting.
I think it can happen. I think your body goes, hey, something changed in the environment, and it's a high fat environment, a low carb environment. And I've heard recently from Mark Sisson that glucose is able to be metabolized outside of the mitochondria. So in the cytoplasm, but not actually inside mitochondria.
Right.
But fat can only be burned inside mitochondria. So our body, I mentioned body wisdom, they're so smart. They're like, hey, guess what? I need to produce more mitochondria because your body, thankfully, is forgiving. So it doesn't remember the 47 years that I was just giving it carbs.
Right.
All it knew after a few months was, hey, there's just fat here. So, yeah, Kay Lynne got more muscle during that summer of not being able to exercise. Now, whether she actually got more muscle or it became more obvious with the weight loss, I can't be sure of. But her waist did get smaller. So I think she was actually gaining muscle even without the exercise, which was probably part of this mitochondrial biogenesis.
Right. Amazing. Yeah. And I got to let you guys go. Do you have any last thoughts or words of advice?
I would say just to if you are playing around with the idea of making a change, just to go ahead and take the step and try it. And it's okay if you fail. Like we said earlier, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Try it, give it a chance, and search the internet. Like there are so many sources out there. You literally don't have to buy a book or a program or supplements. You can do this all without buying anything and with very little investment, and be very successful.
Yeah, my one wish for people that I meet in my day-to-day life that I've known and I can see them suffering, and they're very talented and driven people, but they haven't and they do very hard things. Holding a job is hard. Being a good spouse is hard. Being a parent or a child, especially if you have aging parents, all these things are very, very difficult. And I urge people to think how much more difficult their life is because they might not have good energy, or they might be anxious or depressed or sick. I almost say that one of the reasons I succeeded is that in some ways I'm lazy, and if I can get good gene signaling and healthy mitochondria and a healthy microbiome just by changing the way I eat, that's awesome. I'm like getting such a better life with minimal effort. And the other thing that I would urge people is when they do find their go time to really give it an honest try, seek out the best information. We use Mark's Daily Apple and Diet Doctor a lot. And there's also a really good website called Break Nutrition, which is a little more on the scientific side, but it's also good for people that are curious. There's so many good books out there. I think if everyone put in the 1 to 3 months to get healthy, maybe for the first time in years or decades, and then saw what living healthy is like, then they can decide to continue or not. And my friend just came up with this. We were kind of discussing this, and I'm bringing up Costco again. So they give free samples out in Costco. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people never start low carb, healthy fat living because you can't know all the benefits it will bring in your life. There are no free samples. You have to put the 3 months in to become fully fat adapted. And so it's kind of a little bit of a leap of faith. And that's why I share our story on social media to point out, at least for us, it was the best decision we ever made.
How can people get in touch with you?
So they can find me mostly on Twitter at Nature Boy RR, one word obviously, Nature Boy RR. I post a lot in a Facebook group called In Support of Paleo and Low Carb Living, and I am also a certified primal health coach through Mark Sisson. If you're interested, you can tweet me at my handle. That's something that I've mostly had 2 wonderful clients, my wife and my daughter, both very happy, both success stories. But right now I do most of my musings on nutrition and health and living a more vibrant life on Twitter. Yeah, her passion is healthy families. And since we have so much firsthand experience with that, and we did this as morbidly obese middle-aged people, which might be a unfortunately large portion of the population, we have a lot of gained wisdom through having lived it ourselves.
Yeah, always willing to help. Anyone tweets or even contact me on Facebook, questions, and we'll answer as well as I can.
Well, thank you guys. You're so generous with your time and inspirational and just full of knowledge and, really nice people and fun to talk to. And I really appreciate you spending your time with me today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was great talking with you. Thank you for having us.
And thank you for taking the time to do this podcast and share your passion with people healing through lifestyle with the world. I really appreciate all your efforts in creating healthier humans.
Well, you're welcome. I appreciate that. Thank you.
If you're ever in Austin, feel free to come visit.
I definitely will. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much for listening to Unleash Your Genius with your host, Dr. Brian Peterson. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit unleashyourgenius.com. We'll catch you next time.